background in the sense that he actually we never read that he actually steps foot in Sodom, other than again, he interacts with the king, but we don't know that he had to go in to town to do that. It doesn't seem like he did. So it's well, we'll talk about it today because we're not, as I said at the beginning, at the outset, we're not going to read all of Sodom. That's going to be over the next couple sessions, but it is, yeah, it's a critical part of Genesis, and we'll see why. We'll see why. So, to catch people up, last week we read about what we left off with was we talked about Abraham being commanded to go through the ritual, the mitzvah of circumcision. And
Call from
sorry.
166.
And the fact that this becomes, we mentioned, some people argue it's the only mitzvah, the only commandment that we have in the whole book of Genesis. And obviously it becomes a very big part of the Jewish people. And we also hear this where we left off. I want to make sure that I don't want to leave off anything that we talked about last week. They also have their names changed. Abraham and Sarah are both changed. Avram to Avraham, Sarai to Sarah. And again, it's important when somebody takes on a new name, it is critical. It's a part of who they are, and names are very important in Hebrew, and they are as we're reading right now, Isaac's name actually is unfolds here in this story. So where we left off, exactly where we left off, was Avraham being told that he's going to have a child, and it says, and he says, he laughs and he says, "Can a child be born to a man 100 years old, or Sarah bear a child at 90?" And we are going to read the other version of this, which is Sarah laughing, which is the more famous version of that. But and people forget that there's another version of this story where Abraham laughs. The original, or the first version of it, is Sarah, is Abraham actually. And I guess we will talk about it when we read the next one. Why is the Sarah one the one that we the one that we know, and why is that one the one that sticks out? And the fact that Isaac's name Yitzchak, Vayitzchak, that he laughed, that's also in the Sarah version. Clearly, that's how Isaac gets his name, is from the laughter that he brings to his parents, which on one hand seems to be happiness, but on the other hand, it also seems to be like, are you kidding me? It's the laughter of disbelief. It's the laughter of, you got to be kidding, which is, I'm 100 years old. How am I going to have a baby? That kind of thing. So that's where we left off. Yes, somebody had something to say. Hello? No? Yes? No? Okay. So let's jump in to the end of the last half of chapter 17. And what do you think as far as um, let's do we have someone who wants to read first? We'll start here. Well, we finished off with this, and somebody wants to. Rosemary, would
I
you like
can
to
read.
start? Yeah.
And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live by your favor." God said, "Nevertheless, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will maintain my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring to come. As for Ishmael, I have heeded you. I hereby bless him. I will make him fertile and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 chieftains, and I will make of him a great nation. But my covenant I will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year." Done speaking with him, God was gone from Abraham.
Okay, so this is the Annunciation story as it's told to Abraham, which is, yeah, I Ishmael is going to be okay, which again, it seems that Abraham is like, hey, do I really have to go through this having another kid business? Let's let Ishmael be my descendant. And God says, no, he's not the guy. He'll be okay. I'll do what you say. I'll give him a blessing, but the line is supposed to go through Isaac. It's supposed to go, in a way, through Sarah. Sarah needs to give birth to this child. This has to be Sarah's child directly. So there's an interesting issue here, which you can make the argument. Abraham now has a child. It's the fruit of his loins. It's his son. And to some extent, he's okay with that. That's he doesn't care necessarily who the mother of that child is. He is okay with the fact that, hey, God, you promised me a child and you gave me a child. I can have this child could have lots of kids and I could have lots of descendants, just what you promised me. And he seems okay with that. But God says, no, you're not done. And maybe, and people have made this argument before, it's not so much who the dad is, it's who the mom is. That the mom, and we'll see this with both Rebecca and with Rachel and Leah, the mom is really a determining factor of kind of what happens with that next dynasty. So I don't want to say, and nobody's gonna, I don't want it to be overly said that this is actually more of a a statement of the matriarchs, that this is a statement of the importance of women in the Bible. Some people have made that claim. I think it's kind of, you're kind of picking and choosing what you want to see here. I mean, I get why people do it, but and it's not just that women are factories for giving birth, but look what happens here, which is he basically says, I need to have you needed me to have a kid. I had a kid. This should be enough. And God says, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be yet. And again, maybe it's also the way for Abraham to be a father of many nations. He has to have kids. Essentially, he has to procreate with women that are going to create different tribes, if you will. So there's an annunciation next year. This time, you're going to have a baby. Sorry, keeps phone keeps ringing. Um, they are talking about really now um a way of making this, bringing this to fruition and having it go according to God's plan, which is, I told you, I hear what you're saying. You want to make Ishmael a part of this too. Okay, fine. He's kind of a part of this. And and at that point it says God was done. God was done. I'm done. Now, he's not done for a very long time. I will say that. This is not God is walking away and I'm never speaking to Abraham again. But let's take a look at what happens here um, as we wrap up this chapter.
Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all his homeborn slaves and all those he had bought, every male in Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins on that very day, as God had spoken to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, and his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Thus Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on that very day, and all his household, his homeborn slaves, and those that had been bought from outsiders were circumcised with him.
Yeah.
That must have been.
It's a happy, happy day. Everyone's getting circumcised. Yeah, it's not the only mass circumcision scene we'll see
Yeah,
in the book of Genesis, right, Rosemary? It's a little
right.
For
The other one
wait,
has
wait, you know what I was gonna say?
more serious
it's a little,
consequences.
it's a little foreskin shadowing. Yeah, okay.
Oh,
That's ter
Ouch.
that's terrible. Uh, what- you can that's a joke that
I'm
can only
never
be
going to
made.
forget that you said that.
Foreskin shadowing, foreskin shadow. So it is a um, look. Part of the legend of this is that Avraham does it on himself, right? Which is that's pretty hardcore, pretty tough, right? This is a guy who now clearly when it says that he had it done, um, he circumcised it. He could have hired somebody, to do this. It didn't mean that he had to do it with his own hand, but maybe it is, right? And so there's this feeling to some extent that like maybe he did some of it, or if he didn't do some of it, he did some of it with his own hand. There's definitely an understanding that some of this some of this should be done by the person. Some of this should be done by the person who is taking on the responsibility of this. Where am I going with this? Does anybody know where I'm going with this? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, I will tell you where I'm going with this, which is um, there's a tradition that the father is actually so when a father does the circumcision. Yeah, Floyd just said who's going to hire a 99-year-old Moyle? Well, there's there's there are people, especially the Moyle on themselves. No, there are actually one of the Moyles who's still doing work out here, Leibovitz. He's getting up there. He's not 90, but he's been doing it for a long time. Um, so here's what I'm going to tell you. When I was a kid, there and still to some extent, LA has like there's a lot of doctors a lot of urologists who do circumcisions. They're trained, they go through an extra course. And then there's even a Jewish course you can take if you're a doctor and they teach you how to do it the old school way, like how to do a bris. They'll do a training. The Jewish Theological Seminary in New York does a training. So, but when I was, so like at all times, there's like probably only like four or five Moyles that are floating around LA doing their work. And, some of them are doctors, some of them are rabbis, and they're doing the work. And when I was a kid, that was the case, and it's still the case. And, I'll hear about, the Moyles will tell me, I just drove out to the desert. I drove out to Mojave to do a bris with a whole biker family. Like I'll hear stories about like the different places that they'll go to do their job. But there's only a few of them. But here's the thing that's happened in the last 20 or so years, which I'm just going to tell you, you can take of it what you want. But because there's this understanding that Avraham maybe did it himself, there is it's a growing tradition. I'm, I promise you, I'm not making this up. There's a growing tradition that the father will, okay, he designates the Moyle to do the work. You actually say, and some of the rabbis and some of the traditional people say, hey, would you like me to do the cutting for you? And it's like a joke. But what we've seen now in the last 20 years is that some of the Moyles will actually be asked by the father and kind of like it's like a known thing where the father will actually make the final incision. Everything will be set up and then the father will make the final cut, will make the actual cut of the bris, because it seems as though at least the tradition is that Abraham did it himself. Even again, did it on Ishmael himself. So it doesn't necessarily have to be read that way, but when it says he was 99 years old when he circumcised the flesh, again, it doesn't mean that he didn't hire somebody, but it was also possible with the plain reading of the text that he actually did it himself. And so there are fathers now I know, like my friend who's a rabbi, he did it, he made the final cut. I'm like, that's where I said, thank God I had daughters, because I would have at least thought about it. I definitely am a little squeamish when it comes to the breast. There's no doubt about it. But I might have done it because of my feeling of like wanting to fulfill a mitzvah. And rather than designate an agent to fulfill a mitzvah for me, would I have done it myself? Well, thank God I didn't have to think about that. And don't ask me if I'd ever do it on a grandkid because yeah, I don't want to think about that. But technically speaking, it's not my job anyways as the father. I mean that's where you'd actually have the where you have that yeah, would I feel confident myself to yeah, probably not. I yeah, I mean I don't do medical work, you know, as a hobby, so I don't think I would, but I get it. I mean, I understand why people do it. I'm definitely not knocking the dad who decided to do it himself. I get it. So yeah, this is the actual milah. This is the actual circumcision. Call it a bris, right? Bris doesn't mean circumcision. I know you think it does. I know we use that word all the time, but a brit, literally means the covenant. It's the milah, right? It's the milah that's the circumcision, and that's why the person who does it's called a mohel, a moil, because they are the person who does the milah, does the circumcision. So the foreskin is called the aral, or it says arlato. It's that's his foreskin, but the act of doing it, of making the cutting, is the mal, is the mila. Okay, so any of the times you see the words nimlu here, behimlu, this is the circumcision. So aral is the foreskin, and the Malay nimol is another verb for circumcised. Everybody good with that? All right.
Oh,
Any questions about that? So Ishmael, my friends, was circumcised at 13. And I have to make this comment every time we read this. I would much prefer to have to do a haftarah. Uh, it's my at my bar mitzvah, I simply read the Torah. This is not the way I would want to celebrate my 13th birthday. Not an easy thing to do, right? Correct? Everybody agreement on that?
yes.
Um, uh, I will tell you that the interesting thing about this is that within Islam, there is no rule that you have to be circumcised. But um, there is um, there is a tradition in Islam to do it within the first 40 days, which is similar to ours, but it's not universally set within Islam. And there are definitely people who have created maybe also um, following traditions of Ishmael of the Bible, which again, it's not this way in the Quran, but um, in Malaysia, for example, it's sometimes done at 13. Okay. So the Quran doesn't say you have to be circumcised, but because it was common amongst the Arabian Peninsula at the time, the stories of Abraham were, yeah, I will tell you, let me just show you this real quick.
So it's only in Malaysia at 13?
No, no, no. At third, no, no, it's not the only, but like Malaysia is one of those countries. But remember how I told you that we talked about this last week. One of the things that we talked about was like, well, what about Noah? What about Adam? Were these people circumcised? And again, one of the things I told you is there's midrash that some of these people were born without a foreskin, which of course there's a hadith. There's a hadith that Muhammad was born without a foreskin. Uh, and then there's a tradition that his grandfather circumcised him when he was 7 days old. Um, so, um, I mean, if you read here, the Quran itself does not mention circumcision exactly in any verse. In the time of Muhammad, both male and female circumcision were carried out by pagan Arabian tribes. Jewish tribes of Arabia obviously were doing it as well. So um, yeah, this is you can see different areas where it's more common. Um, you know, you can see there's differences of opinion um, about what to do. All right,
Is
so
is female circumcision an Islamic thing?
it's not only Islamic, but it is oftentimes practiced in Muslim countries.
Somalia. I thought Somalia was one, right?
Yeah, it was. So yeah,
And that's
so
Muslim usually.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
since you asked, this is percentage of females aged 15 to 49 with female um,
Yeah.
circumcision. So you can see
Wow.
some of these countries like Egypt. Here's Somalia that you were talking about,
Uh-huh.
90 to 98%.
Wow.
70 to 80% in Ethiopia, which is not even Muslim.
Still
Oh,
to
I
this
had no
day.
idea.
Yeah,
What
and
is
then you can see down
Ethiopian? Are they
you see
Christian?
you can see down here. Yeah, Ethiopia is mainly Christian. So you can
And
see
they
some
have
of it.
female
Yeah,
circumcision.
some of
Wow.
it some of it's cultural. So if you look down here in Malaysia and Indonesia, it's pretty high too. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm only saying that since you brought it up, but yeah, it's
Oh no,
it's
it's horrific.
there's nothing in here that talks about that in the Hebrew Bible, which is why it's usually not in Judaism. It's not. Look, we talked about it a little bit last week, but I will say it again since I mean, this is the end of it, but well, it's not the end of it because Isaac is going to be the first person ever that we know of who gets circumcised at the eighth day. But this is really where it is in the Bible. And I will say this. Well, we kind of said it. I'll say it again. It's very strange that the Bible and kind of Jewish tradition as a whole sees the human body as a gift from God, something that we're not supposed to mutilate or cut, with this one exception, which is a big exception. But it is an exception. It is the exception to some extent that some would say proves the rule. And this is what it comes down to me, to some extent. I mean, this is the way I've kind of understood it, is that when somebody is covenanted in this way, through the Milah, and by the way, up until this time, we've had covenants where God has told Noah that there's never going to be another flood, and God told Abraham, you're going to have a family. But now the covenant is essentially, we call it a Brit Milah. It's a covenant of the flesh. The covenant, the seal of the covenant is the circumcision. So, again, I did mention this already, in the Zohar and Kabbalah, removing, I showed you remember I showed you the table of how the sphirot line up on the human body, that removing the orla, removing the foreskin, allows for divine flow to flow through the human body. Without it, it's a barrier. I mean, that's the way Jewish mysticism saw the generativity of the yesod, of that part of the human body that's associated with the sphira, with the emanation of yesod, that is where, that's the way it manifests, right? So this is, to some extent, you're saying my body carries my covenant. My body reflects the covenant, and it's, of course, something that nobody
Didn't
sees.
Egyptians do this too? I mean,
Yeah,
I thought it
but
was to identify the tribe in like battle, right?
yeah, well, there is that issue, right? Of knowing who your people are by this tradition, but clearly for Jews, it wasn't that that wasn't it, right? Because covering your body was so important, as opposed to the Greeks and the Romans, that it wasn't like everyone's going to know, hey, he's Jewish. Um, that's the giveaway, if you will. But what's interesting about what happens here with this issue, and again, I repeated this because we talked about genital. female genital, and then we call it mutilation. Like, why don't we call it male mutilation? I mean, you can make the argument that's what it is. I mean, people have made that argument. I'm not making it, but I'm saying it's been made. And so it's very interesting that within the Jewish world, we understand that the human body is not supposed to be, you know, cut into, which was why we traditionally don't have tattoos, why we traditionally don't have, scarring and doing that to our bodies. But I mean, I'm going to give you a little secret. There are a lot of Jews walking around with nose jobs, right? And their bodies got cut into for that. So, 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 keep that in mind that, we clearly don't see those as mutilations, but we see them as changing the gift that God gave us. So there's no biblical or we wouldn't say that there's like an injunction against doing plastic surgery. So so clearly there's gray areas here, but this is a huge issue. And again, why is I mean, look, I'm going to tell you this too. I think most Jews are so upset and so triggered by female uh, circumcision. We don't like. I don't even call it circumcision. We call it mutilation. Like, why are Jews so triggered by that when we kind of invented this? We didn't invent it, but institutionalized it. It is. It's a very strange thing because I think what we realize is to some extent when it comes to a woman that what's happening is that this is an act of men taking away a woman's ability to enjoy sex. And so that's where we start to go, oh, this is mutilation. This is not like anything other than the worst way of, like, it's like branding a cattle. So we really, I think most Jews are really triggered by the discussion about women. And again, it's never been hardly, I mean, I'd say the opposite, encouraged by Jews to be done. Uh, but again, it's a very cultural, it's not so much even a religious thing within Islam, it's more of a cultural thing. That's why I want to make it clear that, yeah, it's definitely been institutionalized in many Muslim societies, but it was more of a cultural thing to some extent. Again, I'm not going to comment on it from the standpoint of Islam, but I will say, like, as a Jew, one of the reasons why we get so triggered by it is it seems as though it's, to us, it really feels like you're taking away the rights of women by doing this. So,
We
anyway,
had to study this in philosophy class when I was in college. I
really?
had to watch the videos and it was awful.
Really?
And it is. It's they get these young girls, maybe 11, 12 years old. It's awful. It's just awful. And
Yeah,
it is mutilation,
I
definitely
mean, I
mutilation.
think it
And
is.
and it was because they didn't want them to have pleasure
Yeah,
or
yeah,
It's like they can't trust them to be
yeah, yeah,
to one person. That they are going to be just
yeah.
floozy or something.
I will tell you again from a philosophical answer. Then you go, well, why do we do it to a baby when he's 8 days old and he has no say over it? And then you get into the arguments of the health benefits, right? Are there health benefits? And obviously for a long time, pediatricians in the United States said yes, their health benefits are there and they're enough to do it. And then it's gone back and forth. And then there's the other issue, which is clearly for thousands of years men have been able to be circumcised and still enjoy sex, and it's not like, and again, then there's the argument, well, you don't know because you've been circumcised, you don't know how much you'd enjoy sex more if you had a foreskin. Like, you can't argue this to some extent without kind of entering into the theoretical, you know who knows, right? But I will tell you that for most Jews, when we hear about female mutilation, it triggers something within us that's just like, this is why, this is what we're fighting against. This, this is the society, this is the culture that that cannot take over the world, whatever it is. It starts to like just it really gets us at this level. So it's a good discussion, and I'm glad we brought it up. I didn't know we were going to talk about it, but I do think that it is something to think about, and continue to think about it, as we
It's just
go through
horrific. And I
life.
had no idea it was so, there were
Oh
so many
yeah.
countries, so,
Yeah,
so much.
it's not just
I
the
knew
Arab
about
it's not
Somalia.
just the Arab world. It's
Wow.
throughout Muslim countries, like I said, especially in Southeast Asia, and
So it's cultural, it's not just religious.
it's not just religious, but it was, to some extent, I will say, some of it was spread to countries where it wasn't cultural, but they did it because it was part of what some Islamic teachers were telling people to do. So it was religious, it was also cultural, but it's now become, I would say, kind of it- it's become an issue in not so much the United States, though it has. Say it hasn't. I didn't say that, but it's really been an issue in Europe, where they have large Muslim populations in countries like France or Germany or Holland,
Do they
where
allow that in France?
no, they don't, but it's still being done. And
Oh,
then it's a question of like, how do we stop it from happening? And you know, yeah, it becomes a real problem in countries where, especially Westerns. Look, I didn't think we were going to go here, but I will tell you this. You know, the this is where it's connected. It's 100%, 100% is connected. Um, this has become an issue because countries in Western Europe that have said, uh, ha, we're not going to allow women to be circumcised, have also said, on the contrary, on the flip side, this was not too long ago, folks. This was 2021.
yeah, I remember this.
Yep. So people were worried in Denmark. There's not a huge Jewish community in Denmark, but yeah, you can see six to 7,000 Jews in Denmark. Only about a dozen or several dozen circumcisions a year. Uh, the official Moil, the religious Jews, does about 10 a year, so it's about a dozen. So they were going to have to go outside of Denmark to have their circumcisions. They're going to
I
have
will,
babies
I will
born.
tell you
They were
this.
going to have to go to Sweden or go to some next door country to have their babies.
When my son had twins, the little boy was he was about 4 pounds, and they didn't want to do the circumcision in the hospital because they
Mhm.
wanted him to be away. And it took them a year for him to be circumcised because the insurance would not pay for it.
Yeah.
After he left the hospital, they didn't want to pay for it. And this town is very liberal, and it was hard to find a doctor, or we could find a moil. But I mean, became it was a difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, according to Jewish law, you are not supposed to do a circumcision on a baby who's not ready for it. Right. So
Right.
if the baby
Right.
is not healthy enough, you do not do the circumcision until the baby is strong enough to go through the circumcision, which goes back to the discussion we also had last week, which was babies were not named until they
But
were
at a
viable.
year, they
Until
need
they, until
anesthetic. It becomes an operation. They need anesthetic and
correct. No,
everything.
no, correct. The longer you go, the more painful it becomes. But again, the issue was that if the baby wasn't going to survive, you did not circumcise or name it, because otherwise
Right.
you would have had to be in the period of mourning, not just a week, not just a month, the shloshim, but for a whole year. There were certain things you would not be able to do, and you'd constantly be in a period of mourning if you were mourning infants that were born, stillborn, and it happened to you, every
When
few months.
Elizabeth lost a baby, this Chabad came out and circumcised him. He died.
Yes, because how old was he when he passed?
He was premature. His lungs weren't developed enough.
Oh, okay. So,
So they, in order for him to be, they circumcised him.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that you won't see done outside of the
Chabad.
Orthodox.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was there a time when, well, look, there's always been rabbinic, there's always been differences of opinion on what to do with an infant who passed, whether you circumcised him and didn't name him. I will only tell you that thank God we don't live in a time when these issues are at the forefront of our minds. On one hand, it's a wonderful miracle that we don't have so many children being, over half babies would die, in childbirth, and a lot of women died in childbirth. Thank God we don't have that, right? On the other hand, for the women who do have to deal with this, it becomes even harder because they have no they feel like they're alone because they have nobody else that has gone through this. So for the women who do have to go through this, it's very hard. And on the other hand, obviously, thank God it's so infrequent. But for the women who do have to go through it, it becomes very hard because they feel like everyone else's baby survived, not mine. So it's very hard. And so that's the good thing. The good side is so many more babies survive. The bad side is for those who don't, it's almost like it makes it even worse. So if we are ready to move on to chapter 18, this is the this is where things this is where things get really complicated. This is where things go off the rails. No, it doesn't go off the rails, but there is some stuff in here. I will only say this. There's some stuff in here which I will tell you what the traditions are on this. I'll tell you what the traditions are on this, and I will tell you there's parts of this that you're going to have to make your own decision. And by the way, your decision might change over time. You might say, I read this before, and last time I read it, it struck me a little different. So, this is the scene. The last chapter, just so you know, was actually, well, I told you there was a giveaway, which is how old they were. Whenever you get into these 13 years old and 99 and this kind of stuff, you're dealing with the priestly author. Now we're going back in chapter 18, we're going back to the J author. And this is where we get better writing to some extent. I mean, I it's kind of a that's kind of, an aesthetic choice, but this is where the writing is a little bit more it's a little bit the narrative is richer, but there's also because of that, there's also a movement away from the details that we have in the priestly author, which is a lot more straightforward and gives us a little bit more stuff we can sink our teeth into. There's always stuff that we don't know, but Jay oftentimes leaves us with lots that we don't know. All right, so let's take a look at chapter 18, which is a lot of
God
it.
appeared to him by the terebinths of Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw three figures standing near him. As soon as he saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and, bowing to the ground, he said, My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought. Bathe your feet, and recline under the tree. And let me fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves. Then go on, seeing that you have come your servant's way. They replied, Do as you have said.
Yep. So um this is um
Is this Jay?
yeah, this is you can tell right away. Couple giveaways. So first of all, what gives it away for you?
The human interest and the way they refer to God.
Yeah. And not least of which is we haven't not been told this yet, but first of all, we have been told, and this is where Jay just clouds everything up for us. Is this God or is this three figures?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So here they're called anashim, they're called men. So I want to make it clear. They will be called angels later. So the fact that these are angels, that's that's okay. But the problem, of course, is that again, how he clouds stuff up. He goes back and forth between calling them men and calling them God, and we're not really sure, like, why are you doing this? Now, again, part of it is that that's Jay. He sees them. He just kind of writes it out, and he's trying to tell a story. He's not trying to make everything line up uh, where you don't have questions. You can make the argument the richer the narrative, the more questions you often have, because you start going off in different directions. You start thinking about different things that the author may not have even intended. Like he didn't necessarily think he was opening up a can of worms by calling them men and then God. Um, Here it translates it, as I said, it says agents or men. Some right, the word is anashim. And um so Avraham is there at his place in Mamre, which we'd already heard about. These terebinths, which is a fancy way of saying Alone Mamre. It's a forest. It's a little forest. Not a big forest necessarily. It's an oasis. It's an oasis of oaks, but it's oak trees. So these are not palm trees. These are alonim, and they are kind of like the places we have here in California, where you get a little orchard. You get a little kind of oak orchard, and that's where he is. His tents are hung out. That's where he's hanging out. And it says it's hot. It says it's a hot day. And he sees these strangers, and of course he runs out to greet them, and he bows to them. And it's not clear whether he knows that they're angels. He doesn't seem to know necessarily right away. He calls them Adonai, but the word Adonai here is not the Yud Hey Vav Hey name. It's literally my lords. And he says, very in a very hospitable way, if it pleases you, if it finds, literally this phrase we have in Hebrew all the time, matzati chen beinecha, if I found favor in your eyes, if he translates it, if it pleases you, but the phrase literally means if I find favor in your eyes, please come in, right? And he says, I'm going to wash your feet, you know I'm going to feed you, you're going to rest. Now, I will say that this becomes the paradigm for the value we have in Judaism of Hachnasat Orchim. And a lot of people have talked about this part. They talk about the fact that this is Middle Eastern hospitality, that if you come into someone's tent, a Bedouin tent, they have to take care of you, they have to feed you, they have to protect you, that this is such an important rule in Bedouin society because, again, if you go outside and no one takes care of you, you die. And again, this will be juxtaposed against the people of Sodom, who are the exact opposite. But welcoming guests, again, what we call in Hebrew Hachnasat Orchim, is a value that we have in Judaism that, according to tradition, goes back to Abraham. Abraham, according to the Midrash, had a tent that was open on four directions, so that anywhere somebody came from, he would see them. He would open his tent up to them. His tent was open to them wherever they came from, whatever place they came from, that he would make sure that he welcomed them, that he would and of course this was what makes him our ancestor, is that he's so good to strangers. And again, does he see them as divine already, or is he just, that's just what he does, right? So I will tell you, it's not just a question of whether these are angels or God or people. They look like people. Is God one of these people? Like, is God one of these three? Um, Needless to say, later on in Christianity, people would say this is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit all coming together. There's three of them. That was not the Midrash, by the way, but you can understand why Christian writers would say, "Oh, this is God. This is the Trinity. This is the three aspects of God." Um, it was interesting because when you think about this, part of the problem is that it goes back and forth between plural, they, and sometimes just God speaking singularly. So it's not clear all the time whether Abraham is speaking to God or is he speaking to these angels.
Now, when
Um,
Jacob fights with the angel, it's Ish, right? It's just man, one single. What they
yeah, yeah, but he also, the blessing is you struggle with God. So this gets to some extent to the nature of angels, right? And so we understand that angels to some extent are the way that we encounter God in our world. When God appears and manifests in our world, it's as an angel. So God is literally represented on earth by these angels. Originally in the Bible, definitely here in Genesis, the angels don't seem to do anything other than what God is directs them to do. They're not working as independent, contractors. They're not doing stuff for God that God just said, "Hey, go down there and take care of this." They're literally doing exactly what God uh, tells them to do. The way that one of my Bible professors explained it, think about it this way: the angels are nothing more than the speaker, right? The speaker, God is the mic is holding the microphone, and God. The words that are coming out of the angels' mouths are literally the words of God. There's nothing that they can say other than what God is saying. So they're literally the way that sound manifests itself in this world, but it's God's voice. So that's one way, again, that traditionally we kind of look at it. Later on in Jewish legends and Jewish midrash, even to some extent, we saw years ago when we read it, the book of Tobit, we have angels that seem to have like a personality, and they seem to not always be doing exactly. They're not literally a manifestation of the hologram of God, if you will. But here, it's not really clear that these angels are doing anything other than like God moving in this world. And again, it's confusing because the language is confusing. A lot of people have commented, and I'm talking about rabbinic commentary 2,000 years ago, is that the angels are, because they're God's agent or representation in this world, that when we welcome them, that we're welcoming God, right? So how does Abraham prove his goodness, his worthiness? Look at the way he treats the angels, but he doesn't know necessarily that they're angels. So when you welcome anybody, you're welcoming the divine presence. And so the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orachim, taking care of human beings, is a way for us to welcome in God, because a human being is created in the image of God. They're God's representation. And so when we welcome the stranger into our house, we're welcoming God. So this is a way for us to encounter God. And that definitely is to some extent reinforced by the inconsistencies and the ambiguity on who's he speaking to. Um, so this is this is this is part of the, and I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I mentioned this the other day. I mean, I'm a sucker for angel stuff. Any angel movie, angel book. To some extent, that goes for their counterparts, their demonic counterparts. I mean, I don't like horror stuff, really. I don't like horror stuff, but I love the mythology of angelology and as such in Jewish texts, and for that matter, later on in Christian texts and Islamic texts. I mean, I'm fascinated with the roles that these angels have, but and I love how we imagine it. I was talking to somebody about this. One of the last angel movies I saw, which which was very, to put it mildly, very uneven. It was the one where Keanu Reeves plays an angel, and that by itself is really shouldn't have had to go any further than that. It's called Good Fortune. It came out last year, but and it had a great cast. I mean, Seth Rogen was in it, Sandra Oh was in it, but it really was kind of very uneven. But this idea that angels, encounter people and to some extent are changed by their relationship with people is an interesting concept. That we also kind of have screwed up some of the angels, but yeah, I mean, Wings of Desire, which was then turned into City of Angels for us.
City of
I love reflections on angelology,
So
but to
this
some
movie
extent,
was
just where it
called Good
starts.
Fortune.
Yeah, good for. I'm not recommending it, by the way. Please do not say that I recommended this movie. But
Okay.
it is one of those takes on, of course, what like if an angel encountered us today in our world, what kind of stuff is going to happen, with an angel using a cell phone and this and that, so all those kind of, the updated versions of these of what does it really say, of course, about us. So Abraham is taking care of these people. We're going to see he what do we say? He does the perfect type of when you're taking care of somebody, right? You under promise and over deliver, right? That's what he did. Oh, yeah. Just wash your feet. We're gonna bathe you a little bit, and we're gonna bring you some food. We're bringing you a morsel of bread. Ah, pot lechem is the word in Hebrew, right? Pot, like the word pita in Hebrew. Pot lechem means like a piece of bread, but it's actually, pita means bread. Pot lechem means like a piece of bread. I'm gonna bring you a bread, but of course that's not what he does. What he did.
Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 seahs of choice flour, knead and make cakes." Then Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, and gave it to a servant boy who hastened to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them, and he waited on them under the tree as they ate.
Okay, so like I said, morsel, a little piece of bread. No, getting you bread. We're getting cake. We're gonna turn it into a whole spread, right? He goes out and gets
We're
breadsticks.
mixing milk and meat.
Well, I was gonna get to that. Okay, just don't jump the don't jump the gun. But yes.
Okay.
So here's the problem, right? So yeah, he gets them because he doesn't just give them food. He gives them, we're gonna get a
It's
calf. We're
a
gonna get
instant rising cakes.
Yes, and by the way, look what he did though. He slaughtered got something from his.
Abraham doesn't know much about baking, I guess.
Okay, but so, well, whatever. He just make some cake, right? And that's the word he uses, a goat. But again, it could be, muffins. It doesn't have to necessarily be.
I don't know. Did
It doesn't have to be a
did they have
cake.
baking soda?
It could be anything that rises. Anyways, so anybody he slaughters an animal to feed these guys. So and he does it fast. You can see him. He says, "Hasten to the tent." He does it fast. That's the words. He says, "Vayimaher." He goes fast. So he wants to take care of these guys. Now, as was just pointed out, there's a problem. There's a problem. He, he, you can serve milk, dairy before meat, but you don't serve dairy after you had meat. And that's what he just did. It says he it seems like he served the milk with the meat and they're eating it together in the same meal.
So I can have a cheeseburger. There we
Okay,
go.
no, wait a second. So you know that this is why they won't even serve dairy desserts at a meat meal, at a fleshig meal, right? They will not serve dairy desserts. They'll serve parve desserts that don't have any milk because you're not supposed to eat milk and meat. And then there's a question of how long you have to wait. Judith, how long do you have to wait? How long did you have to wait between me
It
having?
depends on who you are, where you are,
Okay, but
and who your rabbi is.
What was your family's tradition?
3 hours.
Okay, so
But you could
that's
eat dairy first.
yes, yes.
Right.
So if you follow what a lot of people who were raised in a kosher home, how they were raised, 3 or 4 hours they would wait before they would have dairy after having meat. So that doesn't seem to happen here. Now, there are different interpretations of what happens here. One of the interpretations, of course, is that Abraham doesn't have the laws of kashrut. So how would he know? He didn't know. No one told him. He didn't know. The rabbis don't like that. They don't like that. They don't like the fact that Abraham was operating in ignorance. They don't like it. So he did know because Shem and Eber, his ancestors taught him what to do because Adam knew what to do, and there's always this knowledge. The Torah knowledge was from the beginning, and he knew it. So they can't have that. So how could he make this blunder? Well, he's serving angels, by the way. And by the way, what are they eating? They're angels. Why are they even doing that? Like, why do they even say, "Yeah, go make us food"? Are they eating food? Is this like can they eat food?
But they don't
They're
say that they're
okay,
eating it. He
of course.
offers it.
Of course, but they say go ahead, right? They said go ahead. They didn't say, hey, they could have said, they said, do as you have said.
That's taking away his mitzvah.
Okay, so that's the answers that they weren't really going to eat it. They don't really eat it. They don't eat. Okay, so it's all an illusion. They're not really eating it. But Abraham doesn't know this. So he doesn't really know the rules of angels. Okay, all those are possibilities. But we still go back to, well, why is he serving milk and meat? And so here are some of the traditional answers. The first is that they did indeed wait between. It doesn't say it, but they did wait, and so, or they served the milk, and it's just kind of out of order the way it said it. But um, there's another possibility, which is this is the one. This is the one I always found funny. Was the chema and the chalav, which is the curds and milk, the way it's translated is. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you what the tradition is. You don't have to. Don't get mad at me. Actually, I don't care. I don't need any of this. Was if he didn't actually serve the word for chema and chalav could also be that he prepared for them. Just telling you, schmaltz, which is this wasn't dairy fat or cheese, if you will. It is meat
He
schmaltz.
he served them daya?
Gaia.
That seems
No,
not very
no,
hospitable.
no. It's not. I didn't say Gaia. I said yes. That would be not good. No, he served them schmaltz. He served them a paste made of fat, which we call schmaltz. Now, most of us don't serve schmaltz anymore because it's not good for you. It's not healthy. It
Good.
clogs your arteries, goes right into your arteries. But was done. People did use fat um uh for food and would sometimes there is a tradition of in the Middle East of turning this stuff into a paste, which they would then dip bread in and stuff like that. So that is another possibility. Not likely, but these are some of the possibilities of how we get around Avraham serving serving a non-kosher meal. Because yes, they saw it. They saw it 2,000 years ago. It was glaringly obvious. So either he didn't know, which they didn't like, they served it in the kosher way, which is they ate it and then they ate later. They ate the dairy and then they ate the meat, or they waited. Uh, they waited until after the meat had settled out of their teeth, and then the other possibility is they ate this fat concoction. So those are the different ways that we understand that text without him violating kashrut. Well, or maybe he didn't know kashrut. All right, so but this is all the setup for this scene right here, my friends.
They said to him, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" And he replied, "There, in the tent." Then one said, "I will return to you next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped having her periods. And Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Now that I've lost the ability, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?"
Okay, so this is her very well read, Rosemary. That's what Sarah says while she's laughing, right? And again, the translation is beloti. This is the way they translate it. I can't. The word edna is definitely enjoyment. So that's interesting because, at least on one level, what she's saying is, which I'm just making it clear. First of all, She's laughing, right? You have the laughter, same thing. But here, what she says to some extent is, can I still have sex or enjoyment, however, take it at its face value? But of course, she says, with my husband so old, with my old husband. Now she says I've lost the ability to. I mean, she does say that it's not just my husband. She does say it's also me. Let's read the next one.
Then God said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I in truth bear a child old as I am? Is anything too wondrous for God? I will return to you at the same season next year, and Sarah shall have a son. Sarah lied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was frightened. Came the reply, you did laugh.
All right, so that's the end of the scene. I'm not gonna we're gonna read it in a second. Don't worry, we're not done. But we're done with this scene. We're done with this more famous version of the laughter and the enunciation and corresponding laughter. So now we've read both stories. You've read the P and the J version of this story. You also can kind of course, see the difference between the two writers, which just is a much more well-rounded story with the conversation going back and forth, with there being some tension, to put it mildly. So let's let's talk about it. Anybody have any comments or questions about what you just read? I'm just gonna show it so that you can see where I want to show. I know I'm making it a little bit smaller, but I want you to see the 5 lines. Uh, there's the lines. So
But
it
could
starts
she
here.
laugh to
It starts
herself?
here. So it
But
starts really with,
Abraham and
where's your wife Sarah? And then it
Mm,
goes,
mm,
one said, I will return. Okay, so there you go. There's the story. Yeah.
mhm.
Rosemary, yeah. What were you saying?
Well, it says she laughed to herself, but it also seems that both God and Abraham knew she was laughing.
Yeah, I'm not sure Avraham heard it,
Mm.
but God did.
But God says to Abraham, why did you laugh? And so God seems to be kind of assuming that Abraham knew she did.
No, that's true. I mean, there seems to be an assumption that everybody
Mm,
heard it.
yeah.
Now,
And that they knew she was lying when she said she didn't
well,
laugh.
wait, that's that she says she didn't lie. So,
Mm,
there is this thing with God over the laughter, but it does say, your point is very important. It says that Sarah laughed to herself, Bekir ba, that she laughed to herself. But it does say that she said this,
mm.
I've lost the ability. Now, there's a lot here. There's a lot of levels here to this, which again, we just had the other story, right? We just had the other story of the Sarah version, of the Avram version, where Sarah doesn't, where it says she's having the kid, but it's his reaction, it's his
Mm.
laughter. So first of all, like in that, there's no God confronting him. Why are you laughing?
Yeah, that's
Right?
right.
So it doesn't seem fair, right? It doesn't seem
Yeah.
quite equitable to hear the woman laughs and and
She's
and
chided for
and she's
being
chided for it.
disrespectful. But
Now,
Abraham throws himself on the ground laughing.
laughs.
I
Yes,
could
he's
just
laughing.
see our TFL, you know?
Yes. So there seems to be a little problem with that. Now the confrontation of God saying, of being offended by the fact that Sarah's laughing at him, that's where the thing goes different to some extent. Because if Abraham and Sarah both laughed, they're both laughing at this the idea that they can have kids. Now, if God had confronted Abraham, what would Abraham have said? Would he have lied? Because people say, well, yeah, it's Sarah lie. Why did Sarah lie? Why did she? It's not that she laughed. It's that she was frightened, and God has to say, "You laughed." It's that point right there where you go, does he really like? Why is God being petty about this? Right? Why is God? Why does God have to call her out for laughing? She's 100 years old, 90 years old, whatever. She's allowed to be, she's allowed, she's allowed to be, uh, you know, yeah, you could understand why she laughed. Now, I will say this. There's one of the, um, first of all, it's a different author, and that's not a, that's not a cheap out, but I do want to say that this is what this author does is he provides tension, and oftentimes with God. The tension is sometimes with God, including very famously in the Akedah story. But this writer loves that narrative tension, especially, I would say, especially when God is involved to some extent, which is part of why he's such a great writer. But there's an interesting thing that was pointed out, which I don't think the writer intended, but it's become part of the midrash. It's been part of the what the interpretation of what we take away, which is really, really powerful. It's not what you would think would be the first point in this, which is this. When Sarah laughs and says, "I've lost the ability, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?" Right? That phrase, and some of you know this, so I'm just reminding you of what the text says, the midrash on this is. When she says, "My husband's so old," God said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child as old as I am?'" He didn't say to Abraham, "And you're so old." He edited what she said. So, Rosemary, you're right. The assumption is God and Abraham heard it. But the understanding is always that maybe all they heard was the laughter, the saying to herself is separate. So Vatitzchak Sarah is Sarah laughed. And then she said to herself, rather than saying laughed to herself, saying, Sarah laughed and she said to herself, "Now that I've lost the ability, I might have enjoyment with my husband so old." But God didn't say that part. So God essentially is saying, Abraham, you didn't hear why she laughed. I'm going to tell you why she laughed. And God doesn't say, and by the way, she thinks you're too old to have kids. She thinks she's too old to have a kid. And the rabbis point out that what God does here is omits part of the story. God knows, God knowingly omitted part of what Sarah said. And guess what? We're supposed to learn something from this. Yeah, which is that it's okay to omit some parts of an information that we have, a story or something that somebody says. We're allowed, for the sake of shalom bayit, for the sake of peace in a house, not to report everything that we heard. Because God didn't. God didn't tell Abraham here, your wife thinks you can't perform. She didn't say that. He didn't say that. She said it. He didn't. God didn't say it. So you understand that point? Is that this is one of the places where we learn. We just learned about Haknasat Orchim, about welcoming the strangers. We also learn here about Shalom Bayit, which is that we as individuals have a responsibility to not make a family squabble or a family dysfunction worse by reporting everything that we know. There's a way to say it where you're still trying to help the family and not trying to break the family. Does everybody get that? This is a little thing that, again, you could say the author didn't intend to put it there, but the rabbis pointed it out. They picked it up. Again, tells the story. He's maybe not careful with the way he told the story. He left that part out.
So you don't
And
have,
again,
the point is you don't have to say everything.
no,
Yeah.
you don't have to say the whole story. If you're really trying to create shalom bayit, It doesn't mean you lie. It doesn't say God didn't lie. God just didn't say the whole thing.
Right.
So you can convey something and still work towards having the family stay together. Do you
Yeah. How
understand?
many times have I thought it would have been better if I just kept my mouth shut? That's, I'm going to remember that.
Yes. So does everybody get that? I mean, I don't want to, I'm not going to belabor it, but I want you to know that this becomes, and it's always stuck out of my mind as one of the things that, especially for me, where I have information and, I have to figure out how best to, look, I mean, I don't want to do damage to a family and, um, look, I'm not there to create situations where they're, to, my goal is not to keep static a toxic relationship. I'm not there to preserve order in a place that is is a horrible situation for either party or for that's not my. I definitely don't want to do that. On the other hand, I'm not there to. I'm not there. I can't come in and rescue somebody either. I mean, I know my limitations, but I also know that you know if I don't want to destroy a relationship, I don't come in there going, and this part too. Um, you know, it's the equivalent is again, do I have can we get to the the point of where we have to address a problem and this goes by the way for like, relationships we have with with other family members and with friends and stuff like that, that, it's not just a rabbi or somebody who's somebody's counseling, with, but, you know, sometimes sometimes we purposely try to destroy the relationship because we don't want it, right? But there is this understanding that like if there is something salvageable there, we try not to we try to create shalom. We try to have people be everybody to be healthy and to be stable. I mean, if one person's taking the brunt of it, you know what I mean. But so you see what I'm saying? It is if God can do it, then we should do it. Then we should at least feel like it's okay for us to do that. Um, so yeah, that's what happens there. Any questions or comments about Sarah or so this Sarah laughed Sarah laughed. It becomes there's actually a title of a book, it's a title of a song. It becomes kind of the I think in the modern world for Jewish women, it's become kind of synonymous with like when we say Sarah laughed, it's like look what you know, look at my life, like for better or worse, this is where I am, this kind of resignation with like trying to fix something that we've gotten here already. Why are you messing stuff around? But it's I don't know. Judith, you've taught Sarah laughing before. What is your when you've had the women's retreats? What kind of stuff have you talked about with Sarah laughing?
Keeps going
This is
on.
definitely not. It's definitely not Sarah laughing. Ha ha ha! How funny is this? This is a great story. I'm going to tell you.
No, we talked about achieving dreams late at night, late in life, you know, um, and we've talked about using humor to deal with um, uh, sadness, sad events, things missing in our life, that it's a defense mechanism. We talked about all that. Um, Other than that, nothing in particular. We never talked about Sarah losing the ability or anything. And we talked about, we also did, in one of them, we talked about Sarah's relationship with Hagar, and how, to be, like you mentioned earlier, having to be around people who are able to have babies, who can't have babies, and how difficult that can be. We talked about that. That's kind of where we went with Sarah. The book Sarah Laughed. Um,
Yeah. And by the way, we're not done with Sarah and Hagar, just so you know.
right,
We're still
right.
going to see that scene.
Um, Sarah Laughed was pretty good.
Mhm.
Sarah Laughed, that's the one by what's his name?
And
The
I think it was Michael Kirsch who wrote it. I think. I think. Yeah.
um because I think that was not my favorite of those. Whoever the author was not my favorite of the.
No, it was Vanessa Oakes.
Okay, yeah, it
Vanessa
was not my
Oakes.
favorite of the people that wrote that kind of book. It was not my favorite.
Yep. So, yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, it is an important it is an important thing to Jonathan Kirsch also wrote a book, The Woman Who Laughed at God. That's what it was called. That's a good book too. That's about stories of women in the Bible. The Woman Who Laughed at
He's a
God.
great author. Moses, all of them are just really good.
Yeah. The Jonathan Kirsch ones. He used to be the book writer for the LA Times, and he wrote several like kind of Jewish Bible, versions of the Bible stories. Yeah. So he did one on
Well, the
Moses.
book of the book
He did
about
one on,
Moses made me think of Moses in a whole different way.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, he did one on King
David. Oh,
David.
David was
He did
very
one on
good.
David, King David, the real life of man who ruled Israel. He also did the Moses one, which was Moses a life. So yeah, it's pretty
David was outstanding, I thought.
yeah, it's a
Judith, did you
pretty
read David? Oh yeah, it's very a complex person.
yeah, it's a good one. So Sarah has now been told, Abraham was told, everyone's had a chance to laugh. We're all laughing. It's so much fun. 90-year-old person. All right. John, do you want to take over the reading of the next section, which is
You know what? I think I'm going to defer to Judith this
okay?
week, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. Because this is the end of the Sarah laughing part, and now we get to, as promised, part one of Sodom. Here comes Sodom.
Where am I? The agents set out from there and looked down toward Sodom.
Mhm.
Abraham walking with them to see them off. Now God had said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him.
Yeah, yeah. So this is this goes back to again Abraham's promise of being, you know, the guy, and yeah. There's a midrashic tradition that the three angels all have a different mission. They all have a different purpose. One angel's doing this, one angel they're doing different stuff. So the first angel was there to take care of Abraham, who just circumcised himself. And so there's a tradition that Abraham is recovering still from his very painful bris, um, while the angels come. The angels are there to comfort him, which is another mitzvah. It's another value we have in Judaism, right? Which is called Bikur Cholim. So here we are at the beginning of Abraham, our journey, and we learn these really important values. Hachnasad orachim, taking care of the strangers. Bikur Cholim, to take care of the sick, because here's an angel coming to take care of Abraham. Well, the two other jobs for the angels are to announce Isaac, and then the other one is there to find out what's going on with Sodom. So uh, it seems though here that like more than one went out towards Sodom, but that's what they were here for. These guys had different missions here on the planet. One to take care of Abraham, one to announce Isaac, and then the third to do the reconnaissance around Sodom. So, are these angels in addition to God? That's part of the question. Is one of them God? Are they all God? Do the three angels, do two of them go off? It's the problem with the J author is it's not really clear because it seems like the angels walked away and God's still there. But was God never one of the three? Like, was God in the background while all three were there, but God was there and the angels were doing their thing?
Where
So
did
we don't
is the
know.
angel mentioned in Genesis? Gabriel, are they named?
No, 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 none, no, no, no. We don't get any names of angels until Daniel. I mean, it's you're talking
So is that a
800 years,
Christian thing?
800 years. It's not Christian. It's just not. It's not part of the early biblical authors. They didn't refer to angels as personal. They're not independent agents. They literally will just do what God says,
They're
and
messengers.
yeah,
Name
they're
means messenger.
messengers, but they're literally like holograms or holograph projections of God in this world. So it's not they're not doing what they want to do. There's no independent agency that they have.
So
So it
where did
doesn't make
Gabriel
for
and
it doesn't make for really fun literature because again, by the times the Midrash is written, and by the time we got the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha, we looked at the angel stories from Enoch and from the flood. I mean, you've got angels that are down there having it says that they're having something is having children with humans. It also says that, or in the Midrash, you got angels who were there working with Abraham taking care of him, the Watchers in the Book of Jubilees. But look, but it's long. It's a few hundred years after the Torah, so it's not like it's not here. It's not in the Torah itself. It is definitely there by the time of the Second Temple. By the time of Christianity, it's definitely there.
so where did the idea of Michael, the angel, archangel Michael, and all of that come from?
We're talking about the first times we see it are about 250 BCE, based on our dating of stuff and knowing when we know the book of Daniel was written about 150 during the time of the Maccabees. And most people assume that's not when they started, right? They didn't just start then. That it was maybe 100 years, 150 years before, 200 years before. A lot of people think that the impetus for angelology becoming more prominent in Judaism was stuff that we borrowed from the Persians. Persians had a pretty developed,
Of demons too.
yeah, yeah, especially in the Zoroastrian traditions that we were interacting with. Again, it's hard for us to really know because we have Zoroastrian sources and we definitely have some of their writings. But as I've told you before, there's only about 100,000 Zoroastrians running around today, and it's much different. The religion that's practiced 2,000 years ago, we only have the sources in Judaism and Islam and Christian sources that talk about what Zoroastrians did. It's so hard for us to understand it, and it was such a big religion. I mean, I'm telling you, you have to understand if you were a Jew living in Persia during the time of Esther, it was Christianity. You didn't there was no question what the dominant religion was. They were all Zoroastrian, all the way through the time of the Talmud. It was the dominant religion for most Jews who lived in the Persian Empire, or the different Persian empires. All right. So let's take a look at this very famous scene of what Abraham is going to be told by God. Here we go.
19.
Yep.
For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of God by doing what is just and right, in order that God may bring about for Abraham what has been promised him. Then God said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. But
Yep.
he's reporting after the fact because he's already sent his angels down there to look, right? Or did they just walk
Well,
away, the angels?
no, it seems as though you could make, because again, this. I mean, I just want to make it clear. Like, according to tradition, this is all the same author. I mean, there's not a shift in authorship here. So you have a hard time saying this is all. I mean, it's all this typical J story. God sending the angels there to take care of the reconnaissance. Well, I want to be careful here because the Torah says this. The the midrash on it, the tradition on it is that God knows, of course, what's going on. Like, God doesn't need, like, here it seems like God is like, I'm not 100% sure what's going on, but um the text, I'm gonna be real careful here. The text says that I've heard about it. Like, it this I hear what's happening, but I need to see if, to some extent, just what the Torah says, I need to see if it's as bad as I hear it is. So there's like, I have an idea, but I need to really see it. And to some extent, what they're really saying is, I've got to prove it. I've got to prove that this is really that bad. So again, when we get to what is the outcry that's reached me, right? What is the outcry that's reached me? So there's different midrashim about this, obviously, like what happened. And so there's these different stories about how horrific it was, like what was happening, that the cries of the people, the innocent people who would step foot into, who accidentally came to um, Sodom, they were just stopping there for the day and they end up getting raped, or they end up getting, one of their family members gets taken slave, hostage, becomes a slave. Like these different midrashim about how bad it is, those cries reach God, right? And so, to some extent now God is going to test them, if they will, if you will. God's going to see, is it really that bad? Now, part of what's going on here, and people knew it thousands of years ago, you know it now too, in your heart, there is a issue here, which is that 12 chapters earlier, we read about how God takes care of stuff. God will not necessarily go Noah on these people, but or on everybody, but there's a sense that, like, God said, I'm not going to wipe out the whole world, but what am I going to do with these people? Does God have to get involved? So that's part of it. Part of it is in the background, you have the flood, and we know that. And so now God's taking God's taking action.
But
And
you think that God would know? I mean, He doesn't need to send angels
look,
down.
that's part of this,
So
even in the
maybe He's
Torah.
testing the empathy or teaching empathy, Abraham empathy for other people.
Well, we'll
Maybe.
see, because this is
Okay.
what he says, right? He says, "Can I he is a role model. He's going to teach the generations what to do, that is tzedakah, what is right, what is mishpat, what is legal, what are the ways that we're supposed to, how is society supposed to keep together. He needs to see this, and he needs to know, and he needs to be involved in this. And so here it seems that whatever happens, we'll read this, right?
The agents went on from there to Sodom while Abraham remained standing before God.
So again, it seems as though whatever angels, whether those were the three or whether two of them went and one of them is God, the different interpretations of this. But God is still talking with Abraham while the angels, and again, here they're still called Anashim, that they are going off and doing the job. And Abraham and God are left behind. And here is the very famous scene. This is what we're going to finish with today. This is what Abraham does.
Abraham came forward and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?"
Right.
But where are the
So,
people who complained, who cried out? Don't they
so
live
okay,
there?
yeah, of course, of course. So you're saying, like, if there are people who cried out, what is it? So it goes two ways. The city basically persecuted and killed everyone who was decent, or the people who cry out are the unfortunate folk who walks through, happens to pass through the Texas Chainsaw family, right? They had the bad misfortune of walking into that city from the outside. So the cry was from the people who would come to Sodom and get taken advantage of, or again, horrifically raped, murdered, held hostage, all the things that people of Sodom did, according to the rabbis. So so, but Avram doesn't know that, and Avram knows that, of course, that his nephew Lot is in the area, and maybe again he already knows Lot is living there, but he knows, like in his mind, Abraham is saying that can't everybody can't be bad there. So if there's 50 innocent people, God, come on, can't destroy it, right? And he says, you wouldn't do that, right? God, you would never do that.
And God answered, "If I find within the city of Sodom 50 innocent ones, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Abraham spoke up, saying, "Here I venture to speak to my sovereign, I who am but dust and ashes. What if the 50 innocent should lack 5? Will you destroy the whole city for want of the 5? I will not destroy it if I find 45 there," came the reply.
Yep.
What happened to Gomorrah, though? Now he's just talking about Sodom?
I know. It's a shorthand. It's a shorthand. Yep.
But he spoke up again and said, "What if 40 should be found there? I will not do it for the sake of the 40," came the reply.
Oops.
And he said, "Let not my sovereign be angry if I go on. What if 30 should be found there? I will not do it if I find 30 there," came the reply. And he said, "I venture again to speak to my sovereign. What if 20 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of the 20," came the reply. And he said, "Let not my sovereign be angry if I speak but this last time. What if 10 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of the 10," came the reply. Having finished speaking to Abraham, God departed, and Abraham returned to his place.
Yep. So here's the negotiation, right? 50 to 45 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. Now, the first one's an interesting one because he only goes down by 5, right? And then he's like, yeah, maybe I could push God to 10, Well, he does another 5. He does it to the 40, and then he goes, I'm going to go from 40 to
25.
30.
Yeah.
So I could get him. I got him on the 5. I'm going to push him to 10. And then he pushes him by values of 10 till he gets to 10. So he basically argues with him. He gets 5 negotiations down from that 50. So it's quite a, interesting little negotiation. People pointed out, look, the whole negotiation is there, which is must be a lesson in negotiation, which is, you figure out how you can negotiate with somebody, or maybe you know where you're getting to. You're getting down to 10. So again, people say, is this where we get a concept of a minion from? Kind of, but not necessarily from this. But this idea that if you have 10 people, then you at least have enough to say that this isn't just a fluke, that we have one nice person. So this is the negotiation. Um, but again, the bigger issue is what chutzpah, right? What amazing chutzpah that Avraham is negotiating with God. We've not seen this type of negotiation, or obviously this type of confrontation with God at all. Human beings have generally kind of been very, like we saw with Sarah, they've been very kind of embarrassed, humble, fearful. This takes a little bit of chutzpah. This takes some boldness, and many people say this is Abraham's finest moment. This is Abraham's moral peak. This is a guy who um, somewhat prostituted out his wife and is now arguing uh, for justice. Um, and he, by the way, I'll point out he's going to go back and do the thing with his wife in another couple chapters. So it's not like he comes to the moral pinnacle and then stays there. As a matter of fact, it's been pointed out by many people, and we're going to kind of finish with this because we are not there yet, and we are going to get to it. I told you, many people say the climax of Abraham's story is the Akedah, is the binding of Isaac. And of course, the big question we're left with, and we'll talk about it more when we get to it in a couple chapters after Sodom. Why is Abraham able to argue with God on behalf of these people he doesn't really know in Sodom versus his own son? When God says to him, you got to take your son and sacrifice him, he doesn't say why. What's that about, God? Here, he argues with God. He doesn't know we issue arguing with God. But why doesn't he argue? Is he being tested? Well, fine. It says he's being tested in the Isaac story, and he, doesn't say anything. So this is something to keep in mind. This is something to hold on to. Um, you know, I was going to say something about Sodom. We're about to see the fact that, with all due respect, God doesn't destroy any innocent people, right? God doesn't even destroy one innocent person. So if you're wondering, well, 10, what if there's 5? What if there's 2? No, there's not many, and God gets them out. So the issue is God's not going to destroy anyone who's innocent with the wicked. But this idea that Abraham confronts God and says, you cannot let innocent die in your punishment. Now, again, this isn't why do you let any innocent people die? This is God, you're about to punish these people. Are you going to roll up the innocent with the wicked in your punishment? When you're getting to punishment, divine punishment, will you divinely punish the innocent? And God basically says, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. And to some extent, it also answers that question. Well, what happened with the flood? Like, was it really that bad? And the answer we kind of take away from this is, yeah, it really was that bad. The only people that survived were the people who were in Noah's Ark because no one else out there was could be saved. So this kind of answers that question, and also again, when the rabbi said, why did it take hundreds of years for Noah's Ark to be built? It was to give people a time to get on the ark too. Anybody could have gotten on the ark. No, they had more than enough time to get on the ark. They had generations to get on the ark, and no one got on the ark. Anybody else could have gotten on the ark with Noah, and Noah would have let them on. That's the assumption, because again, God provided for an out for people. So again, this isn't why is there any injustice in the world. This is not why do innocent people, why do babies die? It's not that question. The question here is in divine punishment situations where God wipes the slate clean or is going to go medieval on a place. Why would an innocent person be caught up with that type of destruction? The Jewish people thought God doesn't do that. Our God doesn't do that. Our God doesn't do it, and Jews don't allow it to happen. Look, this is a very viable and relevant question for every one of us, because again, we saw when most of us were heartbroken. I think everybody here was heartbroken to watch innocent children being killed in Gaza. It broke our hearts. If it didn't, then again, you need to have a little evaluation, because we don't want innocent people who haven't committed anything horrible yet. And again, I get the cycles of violence. I understand. I'm not naive, but I will tell you, it bothers us because it bothers Abraham. It bothers our sense of justice that we don't want to see innocent people die. And again, whether the level of innocence that died in Gaza is the same level as Dresden and everything else, we heard all those arguments. It's already been debated out in the internet. You've had those discussions. You've seen them. I'm not going to revisit them, but this idea that we as Jews don't celebrate the death of innocence, where we also have to say, look, we have to minimize the amount of collateral damage that happens. That's not. It's we
Okay.
can't just say, well, that's just what happens in war. We will not say that. And to a large extent, that is not what Israel's argument was. Israel's argument was constantly, we are doing our best to limit the loss of life, whether they did or not. Again, I'm not a military expert by any stretch. I'm so not a military expert, I can't say that. But I will tell you that Israel's answer wasn't, who cares. Israel's answer wasn't, hey, that's just the way the things are. They said, this is something we're working on, this is something we're trying to minimize. And they didn't say, hey, it doesn't matter to us. We have enemies in this world, and I'm saying by we, I mean humanity. We have enemies who don't care, who absolutely don't care if innocent civilians are killed, and we saw it. That's one of the things that they were fighting against in this last war, was literally people who, on the contrary, will say, "I will kill everyone I can because I have the power to kill them." So these are not, like, this is not theoretical, folks. This is not, hey, this is a great story from the Bible that was written 2,800 years ago. This is playing out in our lives, and it's something that I personally thought a lot about over the last 3 or 4 years. So
Maybe this is the attitude I should have about the Pulitzer Prize. You know that the guy got for the pictures of Gaza,
yeah,
that these people suffered. Because at first I was angry. I thought, this is, why aren't the Babas babies, or um, but maybe looking at other people's grief too. I don't know.
I will tell you this. We should be affected by it. It's part of the sadness, it's part of the tragedy of what happened. And I will say this. I personally, in my estimation, and most Israelis on the right and on the left, will tell you that this is another thing that they hold Hamas responsible for, was the death of their own civilians and the fact that they didn't care. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't make it doesn't make it right. It doesn't give us any, it doesn't give me any solace. The people are dead. But I will tell you that and it's something Israel is going to have to deal with now for another couple of generations. So it just prolongs the lack of peace. It makes it more difficult for there to be peace, because people have to overcome their loss, and they have to. But can it happen? Yeah, I don't feel that it never can happen. It's become even more difficult, and that is a little. As we wrap up, it's a little commercial for tomorrow night, which is a look at the history of Israel after 1948. We talked about early Zionism up till 1948. Tomorrow, we are going to start looking at the history of Israel. Now, we do not have class next Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm out of town Tuesday and Wednesday next week. And so we do not have class next Tuesday. We will come back and read the story of Sodom in chapter 19, one of the weirdest chapters of the Bible. So do not come next Tuesday. Well, you can, but I won't be here and there won't be no class. But the following week, as we move into literally the 19th, think about that. On the 19th, you and I will have a chance to read the story of Sodom from chapter 19 of Genesis. The 19th on the 19th. So we will see you then, and thank you.
Rabbi, before you go,
Yes. Yes.
um, uh, as Gloria and I drive back and forth from Oxnard, back and forth the last few days, I've been listening to several hours of the most recent book for the the Sisterhood's Book Club. And what's the name of the book, Gloria?
Hold on, let me look. 1 second.
I
It is called Born Survivors by Wendy Holden.
it's it's specific to what you were just discussing with regards to modern issues, modern conflicts, if you will. This obviously goes back to the Shoah and what happened. I suggest everyone listen to it's better to listen to it than to read it. Um, that's all I can say. It's heartbreak. I can't explain it.
John, what was the name of the book?
Glory, what's the name?
I'm going to put it in the chat, but it's Born Survivors by Wendy Holden, Holden.
Yeah,
Okay.
the book, by the way, if you're not a reader or you don't want to listen to stuff, this book was featured on 60 Minutes about 2 months ago. So if you
Was
go
it
back,
really?
yeah,
Wow.
you can go back. They interviewed the three they interviewed the three people that were interviewed for the book, and this is the book.
It
And
is it's I don't know how to explain it to everybody.
this was the
It's like
60
it's like
Minutes.
a roller coaster.
This was the 60 Minutes story.
Yeah, the guy was probably the sergeant that I'm only guessing based on what we're discussing here is was the one of the first army soldiers, like
Yeah,
at least for this book that
yeah, yeah,
liberated
yeah.
camps.
Yeah,
He absolutely,
this was
yeah,
his dad.
oh, he was the medic. He
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm getting chills, not good chills. I'm just telling you guys, it's I'm gonna watch the 60 Minutes. I
Yeah.
told Glory, um, I'll put my face on so you guys can see me. I told Glory, I couldn't listen to some of it, but you have to. And then we wouldn't, and I could, and I couldn't, and I don't. So finally, we're at the end, the last couple hours, because these guys survive, right, with babies. I'm not going to give it all away. And I finally have to, it's like a relief. I tell you, it's like leaving the doctor's office. It's like a relief, you know? So it's very powerful. And is anyone other than Glory in the Sisterhood book club on this? Mary, are you? Is anybody?
No, I don't think so.
Too bad.
No,
We
yeah,
need
it's a story about three young mothers, um, and how they survived the
to
Holocaust,
giving birth in the
giving
show
birth while being,
in the camps.
yeah,
Oh my.
No, it's incredible.
they
Uh,
Oh,
hid their
goodness.
pregnancies,
it,
and hid the babies too.
it's just
I can't imagine. You just can't imagine.
you can't.
It's
My hat's off to my wife. She listened to the entire 17 hours.
I'm
There were
still
some
listening.
hours
I still have an hour and a half to go.
I just couldn't listen. You just can't listen. You just
I
can't.
think it's
We had
interesting.
a Holocaust survivor at our temple speak that her mother was pregnant with her in the camps, and she got out. But what a heavy thing to carry that
Well, then
you
you need to listen,
yeah.
Gil. You need to listen
I
or
will.
listen, or at least watch the 60 minutes.
I will.
Listen to this book, though.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Anyway, I'm done. Thank
All
you,
right.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you, if
Thanks a
not
lot.
tomorrow night, in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.